Jill Ranishek, and my portion of the business plan is the implementation process. Implementation process has 5 stages: exploration, installation, initial implementation, full implementation, expansion, and scale up. So the exploration phase, the goals of the exploration phase are to identify the need for change, determine what innovation or set of practices will meet the need, and decide whether to move ahead with the implementation process. So we're considering changing the model for care in our facility regarding palliative end-of-life patients, which would require us to open our own palliative wing and transfer those patients that are in need into that wing where we could just focus on palliative measures and end-of-life care. Statistics. 2014, an estimated 1.6 to 1.7 million patients received services from hospice. NHPCO estimates that approximately 1.2 billion deaths occurred in the U.S. while under the care of hospice. Over the past decade, the hospice palliative care community has marked substantial growth. In Medicare patients with a cancer diagnosis, 36.6% were on hospice for 3 or more days in 2001. That number increased to 43.3% in 2007 and continues to grow. So I know in our facility, we see most of our patients need hospice. There are 2 imminent to leave our facility to go to hospice. Those end-of-life talks haven't been had, and then what happens is they end up being here, and in the 11th hour, they start to go downhill and end up dying here in the hospital without obtaining fully the proper palliative care talk and discussion and end-of-life measures that they would need. The next phase would be the installation process. The goal of the installation stage is to build system capacity which will support the implementation of the new practice at our selected site. Our hospital right now has a step-down unit. It's called 2 North, and now it's utilized as an ICU overflow. It's not honestly utilized all that much. So we thought that we would pilot this in using 2 beds in this area and just make those beds the palliative area. So how it would work is if somebody were to a patient would start to make that turn, we could transfer them to the palliative care area, to these 2 beds, and just focus on end-of-life and palliative care measures. We chose this place because it's not utilized all the time. We could very well still keep a bed in there for ICU overflow if need be, but we could also just do end-of-life. It's kind of off of the path of the rest of the hospital. Initial implementation. The goal of the initial implementation is to put the new practices in place at the selected implementation site. Teams will be put in place to guide the process, review data, make decisions, and provide feedback on the successes as well as the challenges. So we would put together our criteria, our module of how we wanted to do the palliative care work and everything like that, and the people that would be running it would be responsible to put together the plan of how well it would work. They would also review the data based on the need. They would also make decisions how to provide feedback to make it better and change things that have become a challenge. So those would be people involved in this, and most likely would be the people that would be running that unit. Initial implementation, our team will consist of 1 nurse, a nurse practitioner, a spiritual counselor, a social worker, and an attending physician. So we could also utilize, that floor is also assigned a nurse assistant, so she would normally be working in with the ICU overflow. So if we had our palliative patients in there, she would be able to assist us when need, probably for cares and things like that, ADLs, all those kinds of things. But I think that we could definitely operate it with just this small staff. Full implementation process. The goals of full implementation are to ensure practices are used with high fidelity and are achieving expected outcomes for all measures. This would include a focus on sustainability, professional development, and organizational structures fully functioning to support practitioners, orientation to provide necessary training and support to newly hired clinicians so that they can use and sustain new practices. So this would be, once we get this up and running, fully operational, everybody working towards the goals and standards that we set into place for this standard of care. We would focus on maintaining those goals and continuing the practices that we set in state, into practice, and then orienting all new people to our standards of care and the measures that we put in place for this type of patient. Full implementation also will be evaluation activities continuing to monitor outcomes of practice so that any challenges that arise can be quickly identified and addressed. In addition to sustaining practices, there will be a focus on beginning scale up and sustainability activities outlined in the implementation plan. So once we're up and running, we also need a continued evaluation of how well we're doing, how well the patients are being cared for, are we succeeding in meeting the patient's needs, and anything that needed to be changed, we'd have to work this out during the implementation phase to see what we need to address and make better, or change that wasn't working. Also, we would start to think about scaling up, making it bigger, maybe finding a bigger space if we were successful, expanding the staff and things like that. That would all be outlined in the scale up expansion portion. The goal of the expansion is to increase the number of beds using the practices with Fidelity. The scale plan would be inclusive of providing appropriate policy, funding, increasing staff, and expanding data collection to support any further implementations. So again, if we're doing well and this is something that's working and we have more patients that we probably could use or could benefit from this practice, we would start to discuss how to make the program bigger, how to add more beds, what funds could we use to get more staff to increase the need if the need is there, and putting more policies into place and just expanding our data collection, maybe adding other practices that would benefit palliative care and end of life and make things better.